Welcome to Covenant Conversations. My name is Kyle Burkholder, and today we are going to be joined by Aaron Damiani. Aaron is a pastor, an author, and maybe my new best friend. You're going to love what we get into. Aaron wrote a book called The Good of Giving Up, all about Lent and fasting and all that goes with it. And so he is going to just deliver incredible wisdom that not only touches on Lent and fasting and those things, but just general life wisdom on what it means to lean in intentionally with the Lord. What are the traps that we face as we do so? Even how do we raise up our children in these spiritual disciplines that can seem pretty difficult and distant for little minds and little bodies? How can we include them in that kingdom practice that is so life-giving for the rest of us? So I cannot wait for you to meet Aaron with me here in this podcast and to hear all that he has to say. So I will stop talking now so you can hear him talk. Let's join into today's conversation. Welcome to Covenant Conversations. My name is Kyle Burkholder. I'm joined today by Aaron Damiani. Aaron is the author of a book called The Good of Giving Up, which is all about Lent and fasting and what God might want to do with us in that. And he, in addition to that, is the brother of Robin Doolin from our staff. And so I'm doubly excited because Aaron is maybe has played the role I play in Robin's life years before I did. But in addition to that, in this, as we enter into the Lenten season, Aaron's got a ton of wisdom for us. So Aaron, thank you for being here. Tell us more about yourself other than new ways for me to aggravate your sister.
I can give you all the history about Robin and all of the buttons to push. So I grew up along with Robin in two parts of Ohio, Southwest Ohio and Northeast Ohio. And as a college student, came to Chicago to attend Moody Bible Institute, later Wheaton College, and that was what transferred me into the world of being a Cubs fan, which is a tragedy, Shakespearean tragedy. And it also was the period of my life where I just discovered some of the early roots of the church and started to deepen my roots there. Some of which I talk about in The Good of Giving Up, and just, man, what was it like to grow up free church, but then learn the value and the wisdom and the beauty and the depth of these Christ-centered practices. But anyway, all that to say, that's where I met and married my wife, Laura. We started our family in Chicago. We moved to Washington, D.C. for a few years, which is where I became a pastor, and then moved back to plant Emmanuel Anglican Church about a dozen years ago. It's a church that I pastor now. It's on the north side of Chicago, not too far from Wrigley Field. And at this point, we've got 4 kids. They're teenagers and one in college. And so our lives are full and busy and overflowing with good things. So that's a little bit about me.
That's fantastic. I did not know you were a Cubs fan, and this further bonds us. Although yes. I will say The Good of Giving Up, I gave up in October of 2003.
Yes.
Yes. And there was a certain thing happened then, and we don't need to talk about it ever again. But I gave up and decided my emotional energy was too invested. Mm-hmm. And so even though they've since conquered the enemy and the curse and all the things, I didn't get any joy of it. And so now I'm now bitter doubly. Mm-hmm. That I suffered and I never got to experience the salvation on the other side of it. So
you paid all the cost without any of the payoff.
It might be it actually might be, I don't know, let's not overstretch, a good parallel to what we're going to talk about today. Because you're here to talk about Lent and fasting. We fast communally as a church. We are embracing the season of Lent as churches do. And yet something you said in your book is maybe the right way to start. I was experiencing the wilderness of being a Cubs fan. You kind of framed Lent as God's invitation into the wilderness. And I found that super fascinating. So I just want to know, can you walk us through kind of what do you mean by that? What does that look like for us?
Yeah, the wilderness we can think of it a little bit as a bit of a spiritual honeymoon or a spiritual retreat with the Lord, where, one of the things that makes trips really powerful, bringing people together, is that you take away the distractions and the stresses that really drain the connection from the relationship. And we see in Scripture that the wilderness really was a place where God wanted to get with his people and talk with them and hear what's on their heart and just have relational, non-distracted time. There's always some discomfort with the wilderness because those distractions actually, there's a reason that we choose them. Sometimes they feel comfortable. They give us a quick fix, and we don't have to deal with the deeper stuff. But the wilderness is a place where we, like Israel before, like Christ, when he was, before he was commissioned for ministry, where he is able to just be with the Father, to pray, to bask in the identity that he was given at his baptism. Israel was able to really sink into that identity that she was given. We've all got to do that. There's just no shortcuts to spending time with the Lord. And yeah, the wilderness really is that distraction-free time. And Lent it's a way for us to get away, without getting away. We're still in our lives, we're still dropping kids off at school. We're going to school ourselves. We're still paying bills. We're still sweeping the kitchen floor. We're still going to church and seeing our friends or going to our small group. We're still living faithfully in the life we have, but some of those distractions are stripped away, and it gives us a chance to take in more of the love of God.
I mean, that's profound, because even the thing I highlighted from your book was when God calls his people into the wilderness, he puts their whole existence on airplane mode. And I thought about that pre-Wi-Fi on an airplane, when you actually used airplane mode because you thought having your 3G internet on was going to crash the plane. You would put your phone or whatever on airplane mode on a plane, and it just became worthless. It was almost like a punishment.
Right.
And I think it's super interesting that more and more these days we're coming to a place where we do understand maybe that airplane mode is a blessing.
Yes.
In our daily lives. And so can you talk about most of us, when we talk about wilderness, or scripturally we see wilderness, we see it as a punishment or a valley, so to speak, in the life of the church or the life of Israel. Can you reframe that as wilderness as being anything other than just this awful thing I have to drudge through, as opposed to an opportunity, more like you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. Well, you think about what Moses heard on the top of the mountain when he actually went up to the mountain to listen to God. And God said, look, I raised you up on eagle's wings. I brought you out of slavery because I love you, and it just took a while for that to sink in. And there was some pain and discomfort involved. But ultimately, the wilderness was about shaping the hearts and minds of the people of Israel to know that they were the beloved. And, so the discomfort, I do think that we often associate discomfort with punishment or with earning and striving. And it's not like that at all. It's more of this is a worthy way for us to enter into the love that we have. If anyone has been through in the process of getting married, let's say, you had to go through a process of death and resurrection. You had to die to what life was like as a single person, all the freedoms that you had, all the habits that you had, also the luxury of not having to communicate or listen with someone that you were in a covenant relationship with. It just requires more of you, but that's not like a punishment. That's actually just the maturity associated with love. That's the disciplines of love. And on the other end of that, there's resurrection, there's reward, there's intimacy, there's power, there's partnership. And so the wilderness is, spiritually speaking, thinking of it as this is relationship time. This is relationship building time between you and the Lord, and you and God's people. And the discomfort is not because you're bad. Sure, we're sinners and we need to repent, but that repentance is just for more love. It's development of the connection.
That's really good. And that maybe leads into the question of how we these days in some way have to construct our own wilderness, reconstruct our own airplane mode of a season when it comes to Lent and honoring that. Can you fill us in just on the basic, first, why do we not eat? What is fasting?
Yeah.
And why is it Lent? As opposed to let's do it in June or let's do it in November. Why do we as Christians, modern Christians, associate fasting and Lent? Where did that start?
Yeah. It really just started when Jesus was resurrected and then ascended, and the disciples and apostles and followers of Jesus wanted to take his words to heart and stay close to him. He said, why would you fast when you've got the bridegroom with you? You'll fast when he's not here anymore. And they said, well, we want to stay close to Jesus. They really believe strongly in their union with Christ as the people of God. And so what they did was, near the anniversary of his death, they would fast. They would do an overnight fast through Easter Sunday. And then that fast grew. As they saw the spiritual benefits of it, they actually lengthened it a little bit at a time, 1 year at a time. And they found that when they brought together fasting with prayer and then also financial generosity to the poor, when you take those three things together and do that as a community, something happens where you have some spiritual transformation that's otherwise not possible. So that's where it really started. It really started as soon as Jesus ascended, and Christians wanted to stay close to him. And then you just find actually that there was, in different parts of the church, in the early church, they would practice like an extended season of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving at different times. And then as the church sought to sort of like bring some unity together across the different parts of global Christianity, they're like, hey, let's do it before Easter, because this is a way for us to prepare for Easter. And that's why we have the season of Lent as we practice it today. So it's not a rule. It's not like a biblical law. You have to do it. But the way I look at it is like, why not do it? You know, why not connect with the persecuted church who's practicing this? Why not get ready for Easter? This is a great time to fast.
Yeah, what a cool opportunity. And you mentioned just now generosity to the poor, which I have to admit, when I was going through your book, it surprised me because I felt guilty immediately, because I was like, I'm supposed to be, we all to some degree rail against the modern evangelical church in the ways that we've over individualized faith.
Yeah.
That it really is a communal thing. And I thought, gosh, that's something I've even lost in this process, where as we lead our community in it, I don't think we have anything related to some sort of generosity or almsgiving. That's not part of our practice. Because largely the way we would sell it, if we're honest, the way we sell fasting, or we sell kind of Lenten disciplines, we sell them as a way for personal closeness with the Lord, for personal reflection and growth. And that feels much more communal. Is that a proper take on that? How did we lose that? What's the benefit for us collectively as we think about the generosity aspect? Because that really surprised me.
It's a great point, and I like the emphasis on the communal versus the individual. They are connected, you know, so personal growth and communal growth really do complement one another, I would say. It's great that fasting brings you closer to God, and it's great that financial generosity to the poor can bring you closer to God as well. And it does bring a communal aspect as well, connecting us with one another as the church, and also connecting us with the people God is seeking and loving in the community and in the poor. I do find that we you know, in the modern world, we do tend to separate things. It's like the scientific method. If you can separate something, you can control it. And the practice of almsgiving in some ways relinquishes, number one, that sense of control, because you don't have control. And number two, that sense of separation. So it's undoing a little bit of what some of the so there's good things with the modern world, but there's some damaging things with the modern world. Almsgiving undoes some of that. So I think about Isaiah 58 really ties together. Hey, look, like fasting and caring for those who are needy in your community really do go together. Love of God, love of neighbor are intertwined and lead to a flourishing spiritual life.
If you're, let's say someone's listening to this, and they're hearing what you're saying right now about almsgiving, and they go, I want to add that into my practice. I want to know how to do that.
Yes.
Do you have an example of either what your church has done in the past, or what you personally in your family, do you have an example of what that looks like? Because for some people, that's going to look like, I guess I go online and make a donation to this cause I care about. For others, they're like, do I need to go build a habitat house? Like, what does that look like in a practical way for somebody?
It's a great question. So here's what I would say. It doesn't start with money. It starts with time. In our society, I would say that time and attention are almost as, if not more valuable than cash. And so some of it comes in, like we talk about clearing away some of the distractions. And we're going to spend less money and time and attention on, let's say, social media or entertainment, that means that we can be a little bit more present to our community. Who are people that we're not seeing that live around us? Are there refugees? Are there single moms? Are there foster kids? Who are the left out ones in our community or around the world even? And can we just be with them? Can we find a way to be with them and to figure, to hear from them? What are your needs? What are you facing? And then we can use some of that time and money that we're not spending on ourselves or on distractions and begin to overflow into their life. One example here that we're going to try out this year at Emmanuel Anglican is there's an organization called Safe Families. Safe Families is an organization that connects single moms mainly and their kids with individuals and families that are able to help them out when they're in a crisis. So if you're a single parent and you have a medical emergency, you need an operation done, what do you do with your infant? What do you do with your third grader? Let's say you need some advice on how to navigate the medical system, but you have no network supporting you in that. Maybe you just need someone to call. So Safe Families connects people who can help and who can maybe watch your kids for the weekend. We're going to give that a whirl, And so another way to do it is to save your money throughout the 6 weeks of Lent and collect a special offering that goes toward maybe a global group that's suffering, giving to the persecuted church, or to kids in India that need education and healthcare, something like that. And that's a way to, hey, we pool our money, and during that final week of Lent, from Palm Sunday through Easter Sunday, we collect funds together and then just give 100% of it away. It's a beautiful act of generosity and unity.
Wow. No, that's something we got to think about. Personally, I think we can all find our lane, like you're talking about, and then even corporately, what does it look like for us to band together? So that's super helpful, and that's going to probably shape us in the years to come as we figure this out. So thanks for that. When we're individually going through this, as we're fasting our way through Lent, what are the traps? Because anything we do, the enemy wants to twist and make for something it wasn't meant to be about. So what's the trap for the modern Christian who says, I'm excited, I'm going to practice the discipline, I'm all in, and I get to the end of it and it wasn't what it was supposed to be? What happened? What did I fall into along the way that kind of took me off course?
Yes. Well, one trap really is that isolation, individualism, where you have all those thoughts and feelings, but no one to share them with. So one is just don't try to do this by yourself without any conversations. Share your experience and give and receive grace. We're all imperfect in this, and we all have doubts and fears and frustrations and pride, and we all need people to pray for us in this process. I'd say too, there's a couple different traps that we can fall into. One is the better than trap, and one is the worse than trap. So the better, you know what I mean?
These are so familiar. I've lived in both of those traps, and they're both pride traps.
Yes, they really are.
You usually get out of the better than trap, and then you find yourself in the worse than trap because that's how you're better than the better than people, is to be worse than them.
It's so true.
Unpack that, because I'm resisting the temptation to be shamed by this, because the Lord has forgiven me. I've been through some of this, but how do I not find myself back in those? What are they? Tell us about better than and worse than.
Totally. So the better than world is the world of I have arrived, or I am at a superior place than other people, or even I'm at a superior place than I was last year. Now I'm enlightened. Now I'm better. Before I was bad. Now I'm good. I fasted. I feel great. I feel close to God. I'm overflowing. And so those who don't, quote unquote, get it as it relates to what I'm doing with my new spiritual disciplines are unenlightened. And I have something that they don't have. And so they need me. The world needs me, quite frankly. And that's the spiritual pride. And it's a temptation for sure. We see that in the Pharisees. They just thought they were better than. Another the other trap really is the worse than trap. I'm a failure. It's the shame, it's the self-flagellation, especially when we practice new spiritual disciplines. Trial and error is like part of the package, like a toddler learning how to walk. Like you're supposed to bonk your head on the ground because that's how they learn. You try and you fall, and that's trial and error is part of growth. So when we internalize failure as I am a worthless person and I'm never going to, when we live in that discouragement, that's also a form of self-absorption and pride, and it's a blind spot, and it keeps us turned in on ourselves. So that's
They
a
both
little bit.
sound like, they both sound like performative.
Yeah, very much
the
so.
one is the performative and the look at me how great I am, and the other is the failure in the performative side. Did you watch Seinfeld? Are you a Seinfeld person?
I sporadically. I was never a Seinfeld like super fan, but I would enjoy it from time to time.
There's this scene where George is famously miserly. George Costanza is famously cheap, and he tips the guy at the pizza shop, but the guy turned his back. And so he felt like he didn't get credit for it, and he was really resentful that he didn't get credit. So the next day he goes back in to get the lunch, and he makes a big show of waving the dollar bill around, and then right as he puts it in the tip jar, the guy turns his back again and leaves the counter. And he was super frustrated because again, I get no credit for the thing I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
And so then he goes to take his money back out and gets caught. And a whole, shenanigans erupt. And that scene really reminds me of maybe what you're talking about, this performative way of fasting, where it's almost like some of us are doing it as if to show God how good we are, to show others how good we are.
Yeah.
And others of us are unworthy to even approach this in some level because I just can't perform. Like I had a cheeseburger Tuesday instead of fasting through lunch, and so now, woe is me. And it all feels very much like this tip jar business to me. Does that ring true?
Definitely. And Jesus talked about it. Like he's like, when you fast, when you pray, when you give alms, don't do it to be seen. I think it's worth knowing that like we all need to be seen at some level. That's a fundamental human need, to be seen by God and to hear him say, hey, I'm proud of you. I take delight in you. You're my daughter. You're my son. And to like feel that, to take that in. It's actually really good to be seen too by people in our life, our parents, our leaders, our peers. Be like, hey, look, you've got something to offer the world, and I'm proud of you, and I love you, and like who you are at your core is beloved. So the problem comes, I think, when there's a little bit of when that's missing, and we want to know that's still true, and so we get it through conditional behavior. We get it through performing, and so the angle is not like, why are we fasting and praying? Well, we want to be seen, and why do we want to be seen? Because there's some pain in there, or there's just that desire to be seen, and so I think some of it just comes in. One of the ways out of that Costanza tipping is just to be like, you know what? I want people to notice. I need to be seen as spiritual, and I'm going to confess that now. And what I love about Lent is that stuff comes up.
Yeah.
It just comes up, and it's awesome because God's like, I knew that all along, and I want you to see it, and I want you to see that I love you, and I forgive you for that, and I do see you, not for the special performing dog and pony show stuff, but I see who you are and who you are becoming. And I will use fasting, prayer, and almsgiving, and I'm going to use your failure too, and all those things to bring you closer to Jesus.
You brought up confession, and that's another part of the book that was enlightening for me, I would say, because like we're encouraging people to fast in groups. We're creating groups especially for this, so we don't want anybody to walk through this alone. We're going to have weekly prayer gatherings at the church for anybody can come in, and both for reflection and for kind of togetherness as we pray over certain themes. And so we're trying to be really intentional with that. But something that probably is missing is that confession piece where you say, how wild would it be to start the process and say, you know what, maybe I'm a little bit afraid that I'm doing this to be seen, and I'm also afraid of not being seen. And if you have a partner you're doing it with or a group you're doing it with, now you have people who can both see you in a healthy
Mm-hmm.
way
Mm-hmm.
and warn you against the public showiness of it. And I think what a
Mm-hmm.
profound thing that is.
Mm.
Are there any other places where confession is maybe a blind spot of ours, where that it's enhancing, not enhancing the experience as if we're on a Disney World ride, but enhancing the practice and the discipline?
For sure. I mean, look, there's a part of us that on the one hand says like, I want to be known. Like I want to be connected. But there's another part of us is like, I don't want to be known.
Hmm.
And quite honestly, there's a reason for that, because we all have something that, like, hey, if people saw that, it would be hard for them to stay in relationship with us. They may not love us anymore. I might not have a relationship if I let myself be known. And there's some discretion there too, like how much do you share and when do you share? So I would say that one of the things that confession does is that it gives us the experience of being known and loved by God, and also known and loved by people in that represent the people of God. It's got to be someone who can handle it. Not everyone can, like you don't confess your sins to your kids unless you sinned against them and you need their forgiveness. But man, someone who can handle it, someone who can, repeat or communicate in word and in relationship that the gospel's true for you. And so it's a profoundly, I would say, integrating experience. We can all get cut off from parts of ourselves that we don't like. And so when we bring out, hey, I'm doing Lent for XYZ motives, or I am really angry about what happened yesterday, and here's how I chose to take out my anger, etc. Or here's the blind spot I've got. For someone to say, yeah, like me too, and also God forgives you. There's a way in which, like, hey, we relax, we stop hiding, and there's more transformation.
That's crazy. The pressure release valve of confession is really a wild idea, but it's beautiful. It sounds like freedom.
Yes.
And it's probably something, especially as modern connected people, hyper connected people, we're not confessing much at all, because we have the illusion, we could say, of community, the illusion of connection. And so what a great word. I hope people take that. I hope maybe our groups start with confession. What are your fears in this? What are your proclivities? That would be great. I primed you with a couple of super practical questions I was going to ask you. So I sent these to you, and I'm super curious what you might have for us. So the first super practical is, we're kind of like, okay, we're going to fast. We're going to get into this. We're doing Lent. What's one of the hidden blessings that you want to make sure someone doesn't miss? So the single mom is listening, or the retiree is listening, and they're going to take on fasting. And if they're not careful, they're going to not eat 2 days a week, sun up to dinner, whatever their practice is. They're going to do a thing. They're going to pray a little bit more and maybe read their Bible more intentionally. They're going to get to the end, and they'll have missed something that you think is really profound and special. What is it that we might miss? What's that big risk there?
Here's one thing that you might miss, and that is that fasting actually gives you more agency over your appetites in general. So
okay, unpack that. It sounds like we're going somewhere. Unpack that. Okay,
so let's say that you are someone who wants to have more agency over your sexual lust. That's been a problem. That's been an issue. One of the ways actually to develop strength for moments where that flares up is actually to fast from food, because what it's doing is it is reordering the human person. So we are meant to basically direct our body, to have agency over it. So it's not, the appetites of our body are not driving our behavior and our spirit. Our spirit is telling our body what to do. So one of the things that really helps, and the same is true for other vices and other ways in which the sort of, you could call them the carnal, like the bodily appetites, to gain mastery, is just start with a meal where you are sort of standing before your hunger pains and saying, I see you, and also I don't obey you. You obey me, because I am obeying God. So that's one thing. That's one counterintuitive thing that over time, what happens is that muscle of agency over your body grows.
Is that essentially, I mean, we talk self-control or we talk of self-discipline, is that essentially in that same vein? So if someone was like, I spend too much time on social media, and we're pretty explicit, like fasting has nothing to do with social media. Don't fast from social media. Fasting biblically is food for a reason. Like maybe God wired us to overcome or deny the appetite, and that would, like you're saying, maybe cascade into other appetites we have. Is this largely, oh man, what I want to avoid doing? And there's no other way to say it, but if you listen to enough podcasts, you watch YouTube or anything, everything is a life hack, right? Everything is a 7 ways to hack your this and take these pills instead of eating, whatever. And so what I don't want to do is ask the question in a way that it sounds like fasting is the hack to growing your self-control or discipline.
Right.
And yet it sounds like it might be part of God's gracious formula to grow our self-discipline and our self-control. Would that be fair to say?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like life hacking is, in some ways, the like multivitamin pill, where like if you ate a meal, it would be like you get so much good vitamins and minerals from a healthy meal that would be digested better, and that would be more human than like a sciencey pill.
Yes.
So maybe life hack is just, it's sort of that like, I don't know, that Frankenstein or something. Like there are ways for us to grow. Like, let's say you want to grow in learning a language. You'd have to submit to some disciplines and go through a process. And the same is true as for Lent. So one thing actually I would say, before you even start the disciplines of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving with the people of God, is ask the Lord, like, Lord, how do you want me to grow? Like, can you just name a virtue or a vice to put off, or maybe you want to become more patient. Maybe that's like patience is the word for Lent. Well, like aim all of the spiritual disciplines of Lent around that one piece of growth. That's your vision. I want to become more patient like Christ. And so then what fasting will do is it will reveal all the ways that you're not patient. Stuff will come to the surface, and you'll confess it. And over time, in a slow and messy and agricultural way, the Lord will use that discipline. He'll send his Holy Spirit through prayer, fasting, almsgiving to cultivate that virtue.
Wow. It sounds like, I'm already doing the extrapolation. It sounds like I pick any of the fruits of the Spirit, as you say, in the agricultural way. If I want to grow in kindness, guess what doesn't lead me naturally to kindness is being hangry. Or if I want to grow in self-control, you know what doesn't lead it feeling like I'm starving at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday? It doesn't lead me to wanting to put off my appetite.
Yeah, it's true.
So that's interesting to ask the Lord, what is that virtue? What is that fruit that you're really wanting to grow in, and then maybe ask him to use this practice to grow it in you. That's super practical. I hope people heard that. If there are parents listening, is the other part. This is hard for me. This is one of my confessions is, I am prone to, I got teenagers as well, and I'm prone to doing things myself and hoping it gets caught, and not as good at the explicit and intentional sharing of a practice. And yet with fasting, especially in the praying side and the almsgiving side, I think we can find some easier ways to share that with kids. But whether they're 5 years old or 15 or 25, it feels, there's something like I'm not going to ask my 12-year-old girl in a world that's obsessed with body image. I'm not going to ask her to not eat a couple days a week.
So
like that could be really dangerous.
Yes.
So can you talk about some of the practical ways that I can invite my children, that we can collectively invite our children into the Lenten experience and even into the shallow end of fasting? What might that look like for kids as opposed to what we're taking on as adults?
Great question. So a couple ideas. One is to even just simplify the meals as a family and give context for it. So, hey, we're going to do once a week, we're going to do like a vegetarian dish. And why are we doing this? Well, hey, this is one of the ways that we're cutting back. We're simplifying, we're reducing, and we're going to put some of the money we would have put toward let's say the chicken or whatever, the fish and the red meat, and we're gonna collect money for the persecuted church or for the foster kids of our community. So there's some family practices that are like sustainable, doable, and also Like you can do it together. Another thing to do is to add some cool stuff. Kids love fire. I will say that you can ask Robin about how kids might love fire, and
we might we got to make sure that producer Robert puts that in his back pocket. We'll mark this down. 35 minutes in, Robert. We got to make sure we're going to ask these questions. We've asked Aaron privately off camera if he'd give us some dirt so we can antagonize our office mate here. But okay, so kids love fire. This is true. Men love fire, so men are probably perking up right now as they heard this.
Yes. So either indoors in a candle sort of way or outdoors in a bonfire sort of way. I would say when it comes to nighttime, like light a candle, light a fire, and let that be a symbol of prayer for you. Take a moment for prayer. Like this is the adding in. This is where it's like the wilderness relationship part where you're praising the light of Christ even as the sun is setting. And there's an opportunity as a family to just make space for God to speak. Read a small verse or passage of scripture and just let it be seasoning your family conversation around dinner. That's one way.
It's almost like an Advent candle in a sense.
That's right.
Just that you're just creating some sort of physical, tangible way of recognizing the season with your kids.
Totally. It's so true. And then I would say on the, hey, invitational side of things, I would, they probably, Kyle, really are watching you, and that a lot is being absorbed that you'll see later. But individually, I find that it's the individual conversations when the siblings aren't around. Hey, what would you think of practicing Lent? And making it an open-handed invitation. Dad's not going to judge you. Mom's not going to judge you if you don't want to. I'm going to do it. Would you like to do it with me? Would you like to give it a whirl? To maybe cut down on social media, Snapchat, sweets.
So for kids, it may be actually helpful to avoid, like since we can't invite them to skip a day's worth of meals, it might be helpful to include some of those peripheral non-food items to just give them a sense of the practice of denial. Is that sort of what that is about?
I think so. Yeah. And also because just in the day we're in, technology with our kids is such an issue. And I know this could touch on painful conversations between parents and kids about technology, and I certainly don't want to press on that. But however, it's one way that we can make the invitation, and thinking of it as a easy yoke. So we're not forcing it, but we are inviting, and there's age appropriate ways to do that. The older kids get, the more agency they're going to need. And that's important to honor as parents as well. It could be that we add in, hey, during Lent, what if the two of us got coffee once a week just for conversation? And not only are you making more space for relationship with God in your life, you're also making more space for relationship with your kids. So there's less of like, hey, I'm coming in correcting you into practicing, and more of like, hey, relationally, I'm inviting you to practice this with me, or just to be together more and to have more of those, soulful conversations, as much as that would be helpful.
Almost like we are to reflect and mirror the Father's invitation to us.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yes. That's right.
Yeah. So parents, if you're listening, that's the invitation. The invitation is God is inviting you constantly into greater fellowship, intimacy, into the disciplines that would draw your heart close to His. So the genius of what Aaron just said is that you don't have to create something new or interesting or novel. You just have to lean into your children the same way that the Father leans into you with the same invitation. Would you agree with that, Aaron?
Much better said. I mean, like that is exactly the heart of it, Kyle. I love that. It really is. It's that loving invitation. It's that open-handed invitation. Think about the father in the prodigal son story. For both of his sons, he was like, I would say, really, really leaning into the relationship and inviting into the relationship. And they were more focused on the stuff. They were more focused on the rules, and that's where we all get stuck, back to the better than, less than. The Father really is opening up relationship, and He does make very tangible sacrifices for those relationships.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's for sure. We see that. That's what the season's all about. So there's such a wild intentionality that is available to us, and I think you've really helped us see that. I want to make sure before we get to closing, um, I think everybody would benefit from reading your book. I couldn't recommend it more highly. The Good of Giving Up. It's on Amazon. We'll get a few and put them in Robin's trunk so people can go just rifle through there and look for one there if we need to. But The Good of Giving Up by Aaron Damiani is worth the read. And I think if it blew my hair back in the ways it did, I'm sure everybody's going to find something that was surprising as well, because it's really rounded me out this year as I look into this season and I approach fasting. And so I just want to say thank you, because that was a gift. And it's just funny the way God works, that it showed up in my Kindle thanks to your sister. And
Amazing.
I couldn't be more grateful for the work you put into it, because I recognize how much labor went into that work, but the blessing is still being rippling outwards. So that's incredible. So thank you for that. Would you have a final, as a pastor, as a brother, would you have a final summary or encouragement for us as we go into the Lenten season, whether it's fasting specifically or just in general, the way the season invites us into the Lord's presence? Would you have something for us there?
I will say this. Easter is coming faster than we know. It's going to be here in the blink of an eye. And I just want you to think about Easter Sunday and think about the joy of the Lord on that first Easter Sunday. And I want you to know that that joy is for you. That joy is for all the people of God. And that joy is in some ways, the North Star. The joy of Christ is that North Star that will, you'll see it through the whole season of Lent. And I would say that the more space we make for the joy of Christ's resurrection, the more joy we will taste. And although I can't predict, and I have no life hack for joy level maximization, maybe a tech bro can come up with that. But I will just say that keep Easter Sunday in mind. Keep the resurrection of Jesus in mind. Keep your own resurrection, the resurrection of the body, before Christ in mind. And just say the best is yet to come.
That's beautiful. That's the perfect way to close. Thank you, Aaron, for being here and being a part of this. Thank you to everybody who's listening, following along, and participating in the movement of Jesus these days. So excited for what is coming in this season and excited for what is next. And so for all of you listening and watching along, thank you for being part of this. And we look forward to seeing you on our very next Covenant Conversation.